Today's episode is the scholar Anasuya's story, where Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are born as her human avatars. Let's see how she overcomes a dilemma that would have stumped most people. Namaskar and welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narada Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you fascinating stories from the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. In this episode, we are doing a story about Anasuya. Anasuya is a scholar with a PhD on the cosmic scale. She's also the wife of Atri, who is one of the Saptarishi, or Super 7 Hall of Fame Rishis. And in this story, we'll see how the Tridev, the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, were born to Anasuya. You're probably puzzled by that. If Anasuya gave birth to Brahma, who gave birth to the universe, where did Anasuya come from? This isn't a chicken or egg problem. Anasuya very clearly was born in the universe that Brahma had created. But whom exactly did Anasuya give birth to? The answer is that it was to some human avatars of the Trinity. Let's continue, and I hope by the end of the story, it'll be all clear. There was a story just a couple of months ago that featured Anasuya. That was episode 258. But it's perfectly okay if you haven't heard it before. I'll recap it quickly. There was a rishi who cursed a man over some trivial reason or another. The man would be dead by the next sunrise. Obviously, the man's wife wasn't happy, and she responded by stopping the sun in its tracks. Only Anasuya's intervention got the world back to normal. And as a reward for her actions, she was given the boon that she would give birth to the Holy Trinity. That boon was about to come true. But let's not start the story with Anasuya, and not the Tridev either. Instead, let's go over to the Tridevi, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva's partners, Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. Saraswati is the goddess of knowledge and learning. Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth and fortune, and Parvati is the goddess of energy and power. So, being married to the Trinity isn't the only thing they have in common. Each of them is a goddess with incredible superpowers. Naturally, they got together to talk about general things. This time, they had gathered in Kailash for their cosmic coffee clutch, and because it was Kailash, that meant Parvati was hosting. I had an interesting thought the other day, Saraswati began. Simple interest or compound interest? Asked Lakshmi, ever the financial guru. It's purely academic, the goddess of learning and knowledge replied. Who is the most virtuous of all of us? Parvati chimed in that it wasn't too much to wonder about. She herself was the most virtuous, given all the evil demons she had defeated in the fight for justice. But Saraswati wasn't convinced. Yes, you protected the rights of innocence, and that makes you a good person. And energy drives the world. You literally make the world go around. And that makes you indispensable. But the most virtuous? I don't think so. On the other hand, the knowledge that I provide empowers people to think, to create and innovate, to appreciate beauty and art. I am the most virtuous here. Lakshmi's counterpoint was that both of them were beating around the bush, or the money tree, as she preferred to think of it. Wealth was the key. Knowledge was useless if a person didn't have their basic needs attended to. You know, food, water, shelter, clothing. All of those things needed wealth, which was impossible without Lakshmi. The three argued about this and only stopped when Parvati said that she heard the notification from her home security system and that they had a visitor. Yes, we can see the bull in the room, Saraswati said, pointing towards Nandi, who is a bull, and Nandi is the security system at Kailash. Anyone comes to visit, Nandi clears it first with Shiva or Parvati. This visitor didn't hand in a visiting card, but there was no need, because the visitor was me. Yes, if you're hearing this podcast for the first time, you may not be aware, but I am a bona fide mythological character myself. And you probably figured this out by now, but I'm also a cosmic gossip columnist. Brahma is my father, and I am the number one fan and president for life of the Vishnu fan club. And I often visit Shiva and Parvati in Kailash, so Parvati wasn't very surprised to see me there. It's tea time, so of course Narada is here, she said. She's not wrong. I do like the tea at Kailash. It's served with a slice of frosty Himalayan toast. The only catch is you have to drink the tea quickly before it freezes. I greeted them all. I must say, I'd have preferred to see a welcome that was less frosty than the Himalayan frosty toast. But after all these years, I don't mind. I have this power of being able to travel anywhere at any time, and I intend to use it fully, regardless of the sort of welcome I receive. There were a few unenthusiastic hellos that felt a little icy, but then something happened that completely changed the mood in the room. I say, Narad can settle this for us, Lakshmi remarked. She went on to explain that I had judged a beauty contest between her and Shani back in episode 80. You and Shani, huh? Saraswati remarked. That must have been a particularly challenging decision for Narad. I don't mind the snide remarks. But now Parvati seemed to agree with Lakshmi. Narad did judge a race between my kids, and he did a fair job. That was in episode 6.5. I wasn't particularly pleased to be in this situation, and I would have liked to weasel out of it if I could. Oh, look at the time, everyone. I had better get back if I want to make it in time to the Vishnu Fan Club Picnic Lunch Commission's planning meeting, I tried to say. But what could I do? When three powerful goddesses ask you to be a judge, you have no choice but to be a judge. So I heard what they were trying to determine. And just like that, my nervousness evaporated. I knew who was the most virtuous, and that meant I wouldn't have to face the wrath of two angry goddesses for having chosen the third one over them. Anasuya, I said. Anasuya? Puzzled Lakshmi. Are you sure you don't mean Ananya, which is one of my alternative names? Anasuya, I said again. That was my story, and I intended to stick to it. The Tridevi huddled like a divine board meeting, whispering in confidentiality. I didn't pry, and before I got the temptation to eavesdrop, they had come to a decision. They each got out their phones and asked Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva to appear. Vishnu and Shiva appeared right away. Saraswati needed to do an OS update on her phone first, so it took slightly longer. What's the level 6 emergency here? Asked Shiva. Then, observing me at the scene, he added, Did Narad mess something up? You might think I resent everyone around me putting me down like this. But I don't mind. These are gods and goddesses we are talking about. And besides, this time there was no way that I could be blamed for this situation. Yes, this is all Narad's mess, all right, Parvati replied. He claims Anasuya is more virtuous than us three, so we want you to go and pressure test that. But dear, I was just about to destroy the universe, Shiva protested. What does it matter who is the most virtuous in a world that is about to end? But the Tridevi could not be convinced. They needed an answer. And more than just an answer, they needed their husbands to go and prove that Anasuya wasn't so virtuous after all. Finally, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva agreed. I stayed back at Kailash. Given the degree of interest in this, Parvati had a live stream set up on the Swarg Special Edition Himalayan-sized holographic TV. And she agreed to the only real incentive I cared about: steaming hot mugs of tea. So, the Tridevi and I sat there, sipping tea, munching popcorn, and observing the Trimurti walking towards Anasuya's home. Parvati had the first reaction. Anasuya's home is eco-friendly, zero waste, and carbon neutral, which is good. If this were the 21st century, it makes no difference right now, not to us, not to the planet. Lakshmi chimed in that she saw there was a pop-up store, Anasuya's authentic ashram accessories. That was a slight positive, but only because of the sign that said 100% of the proceeds would be donated to charitable causes. We continued to watch the Tridev approaching Anasuya's home. The trio had disguised themselves, of course. Showing up as themselves may have had the opposite effect from what they wanted. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva took on the appearance of rishis, wise old men with long grey beards and dressed in rishi clothes. the armbands indicated 5-star Brahma Rishis, which is about as senior as a Rishi can get. And 3 5-star Brahma Rishis in one place would have been given the red carpet treatment by anyone. To be fair, any Rishi would have received the red carpet treatment. But the armbands guaranteed it. Anasuya welcomed the 3 Rishis in, and she offered them food and drink. Atri was not at home just then, which was ideal. But then, that's maybe why Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu had chosen this exact moment to visit her. The rishis maintained serious, solemn expressions throughout, as befitting a rishi who has seen it all, has learned it all, and knows it all. As Anasuya began serving them food on banana leaves, the rishi, who was Shiva, flared up in anger. "What is this?" he asked sternly. "Why, it's lunch, sir," Anasuya answered. "A meal that is eaten in the middle of the day."
"I know what lunch is," he cut her off. "But aren't you supposed to ask us for dietary restrictions?"
That is a good point. I never thought of that before. Everything here is vegan, organic, and gluten-free. Are any of you gentlemen allergic to cosmic quinoa or divine dal? Back in Kailash, Saraswati remarked to me that she had seen nothing spectacular so far. Anasuya seemed an ordinary person, an okay host. And what exactly had I seen in her? But I just asked them all to wait and watch. Now was the time that Shiva was going to spring a trap for her.
"Not allergies. We have taken a special vow. So, we can only be fed by hand. We do not use our own hands to eat. If you were a regular subscriber of Rishi Weekly, you'd have seen an article about this new vow."
Another advantage of being a member of the Holy Trinity is that you can make articles appear retroactively in popular magazines like the Rishi Weekly. Shiva ended his explanation with a demand that Anasuya should feed them with her own hands. This was an unusual request, to say the least. It was highly improper for a married woman to be feeding a stranger in a way that would put her in such close proximity. Therein lay the brilliance of the strategy. It was the equivalent of checkmate. Either Anasuya refused, and that would be insulting her guests who were equivalent to gods. They were actually gods, but she didn't know it. Or she would end up doing something morally reprehensible by feeding them by hand. Dishonor, either way. I could read the room. The Tridevi were sensing victory now. I still didn't say anything. Anasuya pulled a rabbit out of her hat. Not literally, but she found a way to get out of the dilemma. She changed all 3 rishis into babies. When you're a scholar, you learn all kinds of powers, and changing grown rishis into babies seemed to be one such power, for Anasuya at least. I knew this moment was coming, so I was watching everyone's jaw carefully. But I was disappointed. No jaws dropped. They seemed to gracefully accept this. Except Saraswati. She asked us to wait a minute. It seemed baby Brahma had something else to say, and that might put Anasuya in another bind. Maybe there was a twist left in this tale yet. Baby Brahma opened his mouth and spoke. But it all came out as Goo Goo Gaga. The Tridevi realized they had a problem now. They needed their husbands back, and not in baby form, which would be too much work. There was only one thing to do: for all of us to go to Anasuya's. And we did. The Tridevi requested Anasuya to return their husbands back to their normal form. I guess Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva could have easily done so themselves. But I suppose this had to be done in a certain way so that everyone could come out of this with their dignity intact, and to recognize Anasuya's brilliance. Anasuya was of course happy to change them back, and she did. There was no ill will anywhere to be found. Everyone was happy with Anasuya and congratulated her on being the most virtuous. No one said a word to me about how I had been right. Not that I expected that. Anasuya was the woman of the hour. If anyone needed recognition, it was her. To go with that, she was given a boon as well. The scholar said that she wanted the Tridev to be born to her, which was the same as her previous boon. But not to worry, she wasn't wasting an extra boon like this. She really just wanted to have the Holy Trinity be born to her. There wasn't really anything else that she wanted. Everyone readily agreed, and not long after, Anasuya had triplets. Normal human babies, but each child had an element of at least one of the Tridevs. Durvas was a form of Shiva, and that makes sense given Durvasa's temper, or rather the lack of it. We have encountered Durvas before in many stories. He's been responsible for more than one misfortune. The other child was Chandra, a version of Brahma. We may cover Chandra's story in a future episode. Dattatreya has elements of all three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and he is depicted with 3 heads for that reason. In a different version of the story, Anasuya had a daughter as well. We'll leave it there this time. A few notes. If you know your Greek mythology, you may have heard about the judgment of Paris. Basically, if you haven't, the idea was that Paris was asked to decide who was the fairest amongst 3 goddesses. And that's where the similarity to today's story ends. Because Paris picked one of the 3 in exchange for a bribe. Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. One of the goddesses promised that Paris could marry Helen, and that was what led to the Trojan War. It has got nothing to do with today's story, but I thought it was interesting to point out a similar situation where a person was asked to judge between 3 goddesses. There's something similar in Irish mythology as well. But there, it was 3 goddesses who asked invaders from Spain to help name their own country. In the next episode, we'll go back to the Jatak tales. We'll do a story about a miser and learn an important lesson. Thank you all for the comments on social media and on Spotify's Q&A. Now, with the latest update, I can actually reply to the questions there. So, expect to see a few replies directly on your comments. If you have any other comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or on Spotify. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. You can listen to the show on all podcast apps, and that now includes YouTube. If you want to send me an email, it's storiesfromindiapodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.